Thanks, Ed. And what a season opener we have, Jimmy. We're going to just start with this one for tonight, and it's Sydney and the Melbourne Football Club, and they'd see themselves as both a premiership chance this year, wouldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely, Lloydie. Obviously some change here at the Swans. They brought in a number of big-name players, and none bigger than the man standing next year. He used to do ruck practice during the week with this big guy.
So they play very differently. So Gawn is the best aerialist in the game as a ruckman. So Brodie Grundy isn't strong at this. So he averages 3 marks across his 196-game career, whereas this is where Gawn will look to expose Brodie Grundy. But I believe there's an area where Grundy can go after Max Gawn. Gawn doesn't like guys who come after him. So there's Maxi Gawn. He's great behind the ball. He's great at stoppage. He's brilliant with goal kicking as well. But this is where Grundy's at his best when he follows up.
Yeah, where he gets possessions around the ground. We saw Grundy be an All-Australian multiple times, and he almost played that role as a really big midfielder. He'd knock it down to himself, he'd get involved, but then on transition, you'd see him charging up and down the middle of the ground. Max Gawn's got a big tank himself, but Grundy's got to ask enough questions of him around the ground.
No doubt about that. And I think where I'm worried about the Sydney Swans in this game is they've got 3 big outs. Taylor Adams, the recruit, they've got Mills and Parker all aren't playing. So look at the ages and the experience of the Melbourne midfield. They are tough, they are brutal versus the Sydney Swans. That's where I'm leaning towards Melbourne. Yeah,
and you have a look at some of these players through the middle here. Christian Salem in the last practice game, scratch match, come through the middle, offers a point of difference. Sparrow can play half forward, come through the middle. Rivers over the last 18 months has pushed through the middle of the ground. So they've actually added depth to their big bodies, which allows this guy, Petrarca, to spend more time forward, which it's a really good mix, but they're still young and emerging, certainly got the talent.
Let's look at life without Lance Buddy Franklin, who was a superstar for both Hawthorn and the Sydney Swans. How will these guys go? So we've got Luke McDonald, Joel Amati who get their chance, Will Hayward, who I know you want to talk about, but this man, Jake Lever, if he doesn't respect you, he doesn't play on you and he just leaves you, and that's what I want to see, how they handle him tomorrow night.
Yeah, because he just sees the ball and goes for it. And as you mentioned, I touched on Will Hayward. He's a goal-a-game player. I think he's got capability to push into the 40-goal mark because he's an awkward matchup. He's athletic, kicks the ball well, finishes well, and he can be an option actually deep out of the goal square, which I saw them use him a couple of times coming out of the goal square. And he's a hard guy to match up on, while these 2 big guys can push up the ground and mark the footy, which you said Grundy doesn't do a lot of. But these 2 can cover his marking.
So we have the Sydney plan for you. This is how they're going to play against Melbourne tomorrow night. They are not going to kick down the line. They will refuse to kick long to May, long to Gawn, long to Lever. So they will switch and look to go inboard. They'll refuse to kick long down the line, won't they, Jimmy?
Yeah, and this is important too. So they're keeping their width. So when commentators and people talk about keeping their width, it's making the ground really wide. And you'll see why this is important. This is McInerney down here. He's not getting drawn in, and you watch him come through the bottom of the screen. Here he is. Here, Rowbottom kept his width through the middle of the ground. Look who ends up getting the ball, but this is why it's important. So you highlighted Lever. This would be Lever, Gawn, a couple of Melbourne midfielders. They're all caught out of the action. There's 4 of them. And you watch how it plays out. Plenty of time for McInerney. This is Hayward just popping up on the lead. Difficult matchup, quick off the mark, and that's how they can actually expose Melbourne's well-set defence.
So Melbourne will want the game in tight. Sydney will want it on the outside, but I'm tipping Melbourne at the SCG in this one, Jim.
Yeah, I think Melbourne as well, but Sydney will be brave with their ball use. A bit closer than we think, but the D's just.
It's already sold out on Friday night at the Gabba, just as it was in the prelim last year when these 2 put on an epic game the first quarter. Carlton were unbelievable, Jim, and they got Brisbane with speed and also at the clearances. And let's take a look at what that first quarter was like, where they jumped the Brisbane Lions.
Yeah, the Gabba was rocking, but it was the Blues fans who were pretty happy up there, and it's out of stoppage and clearance, as you highlighted, because what the Blues did well last year was they actually didn't get scored against from stoppage themselves, so they actually set up really well, but they've got to ask a lot of questions, take the game forward on the lines. You want to get the back line of Brisbane before they're set, because we know Harris Andrews, who was magnificent in the grand final, Payne, these guys, if they get set up, they're very difficult to score against.
Yeah, there's George Hewitt. That was one of those clearances where they get the ball forward to this man, Charlie Curnow. Can he step up in a big game where he didn't in the final series to challenge Harris Andrews and those types of players? In terms of Kemp, there's no Jacob Wiedering, and he really worried me in the practice game against Melbourne. They dragged him back to the goal square, so I think if believe you're Danaher or your Hipwood. If you get Kemp, just take him back because he's just undersized for that position.
Well, you mentioned Danaher and Hipwood. Both those guys are 200 centimetres tall. Kemp is 192 centimetres. He's fantastic overhead, but you're giving away a fair bit of height and I guess a starting point there. But he needs pressure on the ball. All these are easy kicks for Melbourne. In this case, it'll be Brisbane, obviously, on Friday. But you need pressure on the ball because Melbourne took 20 marks inside forward 50. If you're undersized, you need that ball coming in long, slow. So if you can't mark, at least your teammates can come over and help out.
Brisbane have as much talent as any team in the competition, and it was a very candid Lachie Neale on Monday night speaking about the one that got away.
If I'm being brutally honest, that final series was probably the worst in my career. I think for me, I reflected and just probably thought that I didn't prepare myself for different situations. That last centre clearance after we hit the lead and Dacos handballed the goal. I was a part of that and didn't get a few things right in that passage of play.
These moments keep you up at night, Jim. Talk us through what went wrong for Lachie Neale and the midfielders here.
Yeah, the Lions here at 5 minutes to go in the grand final. They just get left at the stoppage. The spread and I guess the want for it. Of course, the Lions wanted it, but Collingwood absolutely tore out of that stoppage. Some brilliance from Dacos and De Goey. But when we look behind the goals here, you look at this, there's the Brisbane players left at the stoppage, sort of caught ball watching, as they say. There's Dacos, De Goey. We'll see the magnificent handball, which I think Collingwood fans have watched 10,000 times, and De Goey's goal. But the Lions players are left at the stoppage. Oops, I've got to go close the gap. And De Goey, and it's just the little things. And Lachie Neale touched on it, the big moments. And that's where Collingwood eventually won the grand final, the big moments.
That's how they reviewed the game. Chris Fagan asked for the players to put their hand up first, and then he showed the vision afterwards. And you feel they have to change things up in the centre bounce at Brisbane?
I'd just like them to keep continuing the development of Rayner, Bailey, and even the veteran Zorko, because it gives them a point of difference, and it actually allows you to frank the ability of Lachie Neale, the two-time Brownlow medalist, Dunkley, and both those guys are magnificent first possession players. If you look at all this, this is game breaking and actually opens it up for that potent forward line. We know Brisbane, 6 forwards all hit the scoreboard. Normally you have some midfielders who are in your top goal kickers for the season, but if Rayner and Bailey and Zorko can hit the scoreboard, being that midfielder who bursts through the stoppage, I just think it makes them even more dangerous.
Yeah, with no Walsh and also no Wiedering, Brisbane should win this game of football. The next game we're going to look at is the Gold Coast Suns against Damien Hardwick. Obviously got him against his Tigers, former Tigers. And this is what he had to say, Damien Hardwick, when he first got the job at the Gold Coast Suns.
I likened it to waking up on Christmas Day and walking out to a set of brand new toys, which is very exciting. I've got a great new bunch of toys that I'm really looking forward to working with, and I couldn't be more excited.
Here are those toys.
Have a look at them.
Look at all the picks. So he's got Raul Anderson, all these guys who were taken in the first 10, Jimmy. But it's just how good can they be? Is the environment helping them? Can Hardwick get the best out of them? Because I know we look back to practice matches, but it was a worrying night for him against the Giants and how far off they were the other night.
Yeah, they got smashed in every aspect. Inside forward 50s, the Giants had 72, contested ball minus 50. But this is the thing that Hardwick's going to have to work on. And I think it'll be a bit slower than most people are expecting. It'll take probably half of the season for it to click, but it's transition. So they can all win the ball, and you highlight it. There's talent everywhere. But it's how you work as a unit. And I guess it's that discussion where you have impact versus possessions. When you don't have the ball, how are you setting up once the ball turns over? And we have a look at a number of these. They're in the contest. There's no doubting their effort. But what are you doing once the ball is out of your area, and how are you setting up the field? Because it just turned into easy goals for the Giants and good sides. I just want to highlight this one. It's impact around the contest. And here's a couple of guys. I know...
Toby Green.
Toby Green is just here. We're only 7 minutes into the second quarter. We've had a big pre-season. We're all puffing. But this is Toby Green, and you want to measure yourself against the best. And we know all Australian captains star. But this is what you should be aiming for if you're a Gold Coast player. He's just coming past your shoulder there. You'll just keep seeing Toby Green pop up. Here he is, still going through the middle. Even slows down a little bit just to get his timing right. And who gets the footy on the end, and you're just chasing tail. That's what you've got to actually aspire to if you're Gold Coast in attack. But defence, you've got to put the arm across and help out.
You want to be able to trust the Suns, and let's hope we can under Damien Hardwick. This is my question mark on the Richmond Football Club. How good are their tools post, Revolt, Dylan Grimes coming to the end of his career? Are any of these going to be good enough? Gibcus looks the best of them. Is Bolter good enough as a forward? So that's my big question on Richmond this year.
Yeah, I really rate Gibcus, even though he's only in his third year, the way he plays is what we look for in all our key defenders. The ability to mark the footy, and he certainly can launch at it. But we talk about structure for sides. If he can stay fit, hold down centre half back, then you can really explore Noah Bolter up on the forward line, for a lot more weeks, because this guy intercepts the footy, feed it off, and then away you go.
You're tipping the Suns at home?
Richmond.
Yeah, I'll go the Suns. Just the last game we're going to look at is what a game this is going to be. The Giants and the Magpies. It's about time. And what I loved about the Giants was there's a lot of teams who can get to a prelim and be happy that they lost by a point. It was Kingsley's first year, but they genuinely thought, the Giants, that there was one that got away, that they were good enough to win a premiership.
Yeah, and that game in the preliminary final for me, Lloyd, and you and I have spoken about this, was a real battle of the small forward groups of both sides. Both have really dynamic small forward groups. These guys have proven it. They've got Lockie Schultz in, who's a super player. The three for the Giants, and the guy right next to you there, Brent Daniels, his numbers are actually elite when he stays fit. He's the 20 possession a game forward. He kicks a goal a game, but what he does, he sets up and in transition, along with Bedford, the tackling pressure. I mentioned Toby Green before. They're going against a pretty good pack of small forwards there at the Pies.
It's where the game's going a bit. Myercheck is just the workhorse for Collingwood, and you've got Jesse Hogan who plays his role. Everyone else is smalls. Where Collingwood are the best, though, Ed, is they play the moments better than anybody else. And we want to go and look at the red time goals. So when it was there in the grand final, so late in the quarter, Brisbane are up by 4 points. Collingwood had Myercheck kick one with 1:20 to go, and then De Goey after the siren. You cannot switch off against Collingwood. Then the second quarter, 20 seconds to go, it's level. Dacos, this is why he's an absolute freak, arguably the best player in the game. He could have gone to the left, kept boundary side, but he goes into the corridor.
Yeah, and he's identified in front of him. There's two spare numbers back here for the Lions, sitting back there. As you said, he steps inside, hang on, there's too many down the line. And the discipline here for Collingwood, this is how you execute in the big moments. Everyone is playing their role. We talked about keeping your width. Forces Brisbane to roll up and come inside and collapse. And Crispy kicks another goal after the siren.
And then we obviously goes on into the second half. Here's still side bottom. Ed, you must have been going nuts with that goal to put the Magpies 10 points up with 4.5 minutes to go. And then we had the Scott Pendlebury masterclass in that last quarter, where it was one of the great quarters ever that I've seen in the grand final. But in this one, I'm going to tip your Giants because I just think they're probably more ready with that extra week and cherry ripe to go.
Well, you know who I'm going for,
yeah.
So the Giants.
Damo? And you know who I'm going for, Damo?
I'm going for Giants.
Oh,
yeah.
really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Only
It
'cause I
started
think
already. What, you come off a premiership, you're no good, is that it?
You won by a point last time you played them, Ed.
Doesn't matter, we won. Anyway, guys, that was sensational. Thank you very much for putting all the effort into it. It was just great to watch that. It's going to happen every week on Footy Classified.